So I think there's a number of areas where SMEs can find themselves challenged. And I think one of the fundamentals could be, although it's not always the case, the recognition of cybersecurity being an issue for them in the first place. So being able to relate it to something that applies to them as opposed to, for example, just a concern for organizations larger than themselves. However, even when they've recognised the issue, they then got a number of potential other constraints and challenges that they face, thanks very often to fundamentally the size of the organisation. So one is the basically availability of resources. Now this could be the expertise in-house around, well, perhaps IT more generally, but maybe more specifically cybersecurity, but also in terms of resources, actually the finances to do something about cybersecurity. So recognising that a lot of the things that could be useful to do will require some level of investment, so that can be an issue. And another underlying thing is the time to direct towards it, because basically I think for SMEs, and particularly the smaller ones and the micro ones, time is one of the most precious things that they've got, and they need to direct that towards actually doing the business. And so cybersecurity, even if it is recognised as important to enable the business continuity and resilience, is sometimes something that still needs to get put to the side because the business itself needs to run. One of the things is fundamentally the diversity of the advice and guidance and tips that they might find. So one of the things that we did within the early stages of the CyCOS project was actually a bit of an assessment of this. So putting ourselves in the position of an SME wanting to find out more and looking to say, okay, if we were to search for SME cybersecurity guidance or advice, what would we find? And perhaps unsurprisingly, there's a whole range of sources that you will find out there, some more prominent than others within the web search results. But then when we start to dig into those, they vary quite considerably in terms of the depth of advice that's provided, the coverage in terms of the topic areas that get represented, and also fundamentally how actionable the guidance also proves to be. And in our assessment, which we've published a couple of articles that reflect upon this, and we looked at over 30 different sources. So looking at some sources that were, let's say, from government bodies, some from bodies specifically in the SME space, some from internet service providers, some from retailers of technology, etc. So we weren't just looking at one style of source, but that all of them purporting to be guidance, recommendations, best practice for SMEs around cybersecurity. But really, if we to look at the matrix of sort of ticks and gaps that we found, to trying to map these to different areas of coverage, then there really wasn't a single source that covered all of the topic areas, or a topic area that was covered by all of the sources, so to speak. And so I think in practice, what an SME might find is a very different picture depending on where they end up looking. And if they were to settle on one particular source of truth, so to speak, as you might hope that they would be able to do, then they still might find, okay, this might not be saying all the things that they could find of relevance to them. And even if they understand it, a subsequent challenge could be, well, okay, I understand what it's saying, but I don't understand how to do what it's saying. And so that still could be the point at which things fundamentally stop for them. The aim of the project is twofold. So the project itself, to give it its short title, is Cybersecurity Communities of Support. And it's a 2.5-year initiative funded by UK Research and Innovation, and it's linked to the Research Institute in Socio-Technical Cybersecurity. The first phase of the project has been basically to look at, well, what are the challenges that SMEs face? And we've been looking at it from the perspective of the SME audience themselves. So we've done some survey activities, we've done some interviews, and we've also looked from the perspective of those that, well, we term them providers, so those organisations that SMEs might turn to in order to seek support. So the key thing we're interested in the project as a whole is what happens when an SME finds itself in a position where it needs cybersecurity support of any form. So this could be that they want to know generally more about what cybersecurity is, or they might have a more specifically formed question. They might be looking for a recommendation on what is suitable to do a certain thing within cybersecurity. They could be concerned about it, or worst case, I suppose we could say, they could have experienced an incident and want to know what to do to respond to that or to recover from it. And so we've got all these different scenarios where support might be sought. So we've been trying to establish from the current situation, what do SMEs face? What do they do in the situation where support is sought? What do they use as their sources of advice? So that's a lot of the background investigation. And one of the current bits of activity that's still ongoing within the project is collecting what we're calling support journeys from both the SMEs and providers. So when we did survey work and when we did interviews, we were getting them to reflect retrospectively on the experiences they'd had. What we're also trying to do is capture information from them, if you like, as it happens. So if a security question, concern, incident occurs for an SME, or a provider's dealing with an SME and they're having that sort of experience, to sort of log what happens within that interaction, to see the different stages of what we'll term the support journey and how that plays out. Ultimately, is it successful? Does the SME feel that they've got a resolution to what they were looking for, or do they feel that something hasn't been resolved, or indeed the support journey stops at certain points? So we're trying to see where the pinch points are, if you like. So that's the, if you like, the background and investigation phase to sort of characterize the problem. What we're then looking to do, and this is the upcoming part of the project, and we're in the, if you like, the preparation phase for this, is to set up what we're calling these cybersecurity communities of support. So trying to bring SMEs together with providers in a less formal context where, for want of a better term, we can socialize the cybersecurity issues amongst a peer community so that SMEs can get into a position where they can help themselves. So if they've got questions about, well, what would you do in this situation? Others might be able to advise on what they did and what might have worked for them and what didn't. And then there's also obviously the perspective from the providers themselves, so those perhaps with more direct cybersecurity expertise, to inject their opinions in there, in a context where the SME isn't being charged for it. This is not a commercial thing. This is, as I say, a peer community trying to help themselves. And this is something actually that both from our survey activities and from our interviews with both audiences, it emerged without us prompting, that what they often feel they don't have is people like themselves to talk to about certain things. And so being able to connect people up into this community context is something that we hope will add not a replacement for anything that's already there, but some sort of additional channel, additional support fundamentally that they can turn to. One of the things that the project isn't seeking to do is make specific recommendations about use this or that technology, but the communities of support themselves could be a channel for that to emerge. So the project is, as I say, it's looking to provide that avenue for the dialogues to occur. Through that, there's certainly sources of advice that are out there. Again, we identified through our assessment of what's around that there's plenty of good advice that people can be pointed towards, and not all of that necessarily costs money to put into practice. But equally, if you need to invest in a particular, or if you need a particular technology to do something for you within the organization, that could ultimately come down to, yes, some sort of financial investment needs to be made, and that needs to be weighed up. We don't have a specific position on that, because that ultimately comes down to, again, the capacity and the capability and the resources available to an individual SME on a case-by-case basis. But what we are hoping to do is provide that context in which others can help themselves with recommendations and that sort of thing. We do recognise that certain SMEs are finding that, well, okay, there is an expectation on us. So that is a finding that we've had coming out of some of the interviews, for example, that some of the rationale for why they're needing to consider cybersecurity is because somebody that they're essentially part of a business relationship with is looking for them to do so. And that's also something that came through from the talking to some of the providers, that, okay, what's the basis on which SMEs are making contact with them and seeking support? Well, there's generally two main scenarios. One is the SMEs had an incident of some description and they're needing help, or a partner is looking for them to be compliant with something, or to show that they've got additional security in place. So, for example, to seek Cyber Essentials certification, and they're needing support to get to that level. And so there is that potentially in certain supply chains, of course, for SMEs to feel that they are being nudged along the journey by the larger organisation. And there is also potentially a role to play for the large organisation in that context. One of the scenarios in which we could see a community of support forming would be within a particular supply chain context. So a larger organisation being there, able to help and support. If it's got the IT and cybersecurity capability in-house that its SME partners don't have, it could be in a position to share that advice. And that actually is something that came out of the recent McPartland review of cybersecurity, so a recommendation that larger organisations would have a role to play there. So the community of support idea could resonate with that. We've got University of Nottingham, Queen Mary and University of Kent as the academic partners within the collaboration. We also have a whole range of other partners that are supporting the work. So we've got the Home Office, we've got the National Cybersecurity Centre, we've got IASME, who are the NCSC's delivery partner for Cyber Essentials. We've got 3 of the regional cyber resilience centres participating. We've got the Federation of Small Businesses. We've got ISC2, so one of the major certification providers for cybersecurity. We've got the Chartered Institute of Information Security, and we've got the Centre for the New Midlands. And I'm hoping now that I've not omitted anybody from the list, but collectively all of that group is providing support into the realisation of the ideas. Going back to what you were asking about the academic side of it and the scientific draw there, certainly in terms of what we were doing in the early phases of the project, investigating the position of SMEs and the support, we were looking to see what was already done there, what was already out there in the academic scientific literature, so that we weren't directly reinventing the wheel in terms of things that we were looking for. And actually the whole foundation of the project is to try and put something new in that space of, okay, how do we academically understand this relationship between SMEs and their cybersecurity needs? And we're contributing towards the academic literature in the space as well. So as the project has been progressing, we've had publications in international conferences and journals, and more of those will be emerging as the further lessons get learned. So if anybody was to be doing a search on if you like, the academic search engines, so Google Scholar or Scopus or something like that, and searches for our activities, our names and the CyCOS project, you'll find results there that are already out in the public domain. At Info Security Europe, we're actually doing a panel on the keynote stage on the second day, just before lunch. So, what more could you want to put you in a good mood for then going and having some food afterwards? We've got myself, we've got Sapna from the Cyber Resilience Centre for London, we've got Stephen from the Home Office, and we've got Amanda from the Chartered Institute of Information Security. So the 4 of us all being members of the project team, so to speak, and the advisory board. And what we're basically going to be talking about is the experience of supporting SMEs, a lot of things we talked about within this discussion, the challenges that are faced, and how we hope this community approach can help to support that further. I think fundamentally what we're looking for in terms of engagement opportunities for the audience at the event, be they the cyber practitioners or indeed the SMEs that might be there, is we are looking for participation within these communities. So it's an opportunity to express interest, ultimately to sign up for the pilot communities that we want to run within the last 6 months or so of the project. So the project is running until the end of February next year. And so a key part of that is to pilot the community approach and see what lessons get learned there in terms of how well they work, what's needed to keep the participants engaged, the things that they can most usefully do proactively, and how that community aspect hopefully builds its own momentum. And so I say off the back of the keynote panel, we're hoping to provoke some interest and get some engagement from anybody who wants to be part of such a community to help others.